The Winnipeg Jets end up losing to the Vancouver Canucks, and is it time to panic, rebuild, and make trades for the Winnipeg Jets? I say yes, and I'm going to walk you through all my ideas for the trades the Winnipeg Jets should be looking at before the end of this season and into the offseason, and my reasons why. Welcome to the worst sports channel on YouTube, Hot Garbage Sports, with me, Coach Ryan D. Look, the Jets just dropped 1 to Vancouver, and at this point, the losing streak has gotten ridiculous. There's been 2 points in 10 trillion games, it feels like. At this point in the season, with the Jets as far back as the Jets are, they're in 6th place. This is going to be a nearly impossible hole to climb out of. It's not completely impossible mathematically, but when you look at the 2-0-1 point system, meaning 2 points for a win, 0 for a loss, and the loser point, the overtime loss, it is very difficult statistically and mathematically to crawl out of the hole at this point in time. Now, there's going to be a lot of fans on this channel and Jets fans in general that say, hey, there's lots of hockey to be left to play. And you're right. And we're going to cover it the entire way here at Hot Garbage Sports because we're diehard Jets fans. But pragmatically, you got to look at this and go, yeah, okay, sure. You're right. Mathematically, I guess they could come out. Mathematically, they could go on a 15-game winning streak. Will it happen? Probably not. So at this point, with the Jets sitting in 9th or 10th place, it's the worst place to be in hockey. You don't want to be just outside the playoffs. You want to be a little bit lower for a better chance at the lottery. And it's not the place you want to be. Teams don't get out of the black hole of 9-10 and turn around their seasons next year because the pick isn't good enough to do it. And they're just good enough to keep their jobs and stay in. So not an ideal place for the Winnipeg Jets to be. If you listen to Winnipeg Sports Talk podcast with Andrew Hustler Patterson, Michael Remus, they had on Steve Cooley yesterday. Love Steve Cooley. He had something amazing to say. He says he's not a coach, but I am. So I agree with everything Cooley said there. He was a fired up, passionate Jets fan that ended up saying, look, the Winnipeg Jets push so hard for offense that they forget about defense. And then when they forget about defense and they stop scoring, they get pouty and play pretty much, I'm pontificating here, like little children and don't play in the defensive zone properly because they're so worried about producing offensively. And that's what I see. I see guys not paying back in their own zone the right way. They're not back checking properly. The entire decor has gone to sleep. Hellebuck is exhausted because, well, the team in front of him is not doing great and he's not getting a rest. And it has just been an extremely difficult year for the Jets. It's also important to note that at the end of the day, Paul Maurice said this is a very good hockey team. Look, they're just not listening to me. Hopefully a new voice will help them get there. Well, Paul, you are a very good coach, but looks like you may have been wrong on this one. This may be the players, and there's going to be a lot of fans taking a victory lap for that, saying, I told you all along it was the players, but the reality of the situation is the only way to test that theory is you actually have to let the coach go to see what the players do under a new regime, because you can't just go ahead and start trading 5 or 6 key cogs while keeping the coach. That's just not how hockey works. So it looks like it wasn't just necessarily Maurice, the core of the Winnipeg Jets. Something is going on there. And Jets fans, if you stay tuned to the dirt sheets over the last 3-4 years, and let's be honest, you may have because you're subscribed to a channel called Hot Garbage Sports here in Winnipeg. And thank you for that, by the way. Smash a thumbs up, subscribe for your boy, Coach Ryan D. We just passed 4,000 subscribers. Thank you to all you avid NHL fans out there. We cover the best in the NHL. We'd love to have you part of our channel on our journey to 5,000. Thank you so much for getting us to 4,000 people. But if you go back and read the dirt sheets about Winnipeg over the last 3 years, there was Schiefele doesn't like Lowry. Schiefele broke up with his girlfriend. He's not feeling great. Wheeler and Byfuglien had a falling out. Byfuglien quit the team because Wheeler's a jerk. Laine doesn't want to be here because the team's a bunch of jerks, etc., etc., etc. And frankly, with the exception of Zach Bogosian, who's kind of a dingus, and Evander Kane, who is a bigger dingus, the rest of them, where there's smoke, there's usually fire. And there's been repeated stories of this type of stuff, and you can see it on the ice. This team just doesn't gel. The chemistry isn't there. So it may not be as extreme as those sheets are saying, but something is rotten in a Jets locker room, and that means you got to start looking to make trades. Now, the Jets have 2 options when it comes to trades. They can make trades and start rebuilding, and that's where a lot of people are going to look at. Tank for right, go for kids, get picks. Look, that's one way to do it, but the Jets have already done that once. They have a lot of young prospects. The cupboards aren't zero and empty like they were from Atlanta. So as much as that seems, and the narrative seems to be, hey, look, people don't want to play in Winnipeg. The only way you can do is draft them and pray and hope it works out. That isn't necessarily true. We've now entered the era of the hockey trade. We can make actual hockey trades at this point. When you have players ranging from the age 23 to 32, like the Winnipeg Jets do, with term left on their contract, who are good, viable NHL players, you can make hockey deals. You don't just need to make deals for picks. So you can actually flip 3 to 5 of these Winnipeg Jets with term on their deal that are attractive pieces to teams for players that maybe aren't performing well based on the culture of their own teams or their own situation. And you can rebuild the entire team identity around your squad. Hey, look, the Boston Bruins have been doing it for 20 years. They never go right to the basement. They always reload. They never rebuild. Those guys have traded everybody. The voice of public opinion would say, but Ryan, the Boston Bruins have the most money and they're an attractive place in Massachusetts. No one wants to play in Winnipeg. Public opinion. I'm not saying you're going to go out and sign a bunch of free agents to big long-term money. I'm saying you're going to make hockey trades with teams of players that have term and who have to be traded, no movement clauses aside, that have to be traded and come to Winnipeg with term remaining on their deal. And then you have an opportunity to re-sign them into your organization. That's what a hockey deal is. You're not making trades for draft picks or rental players. Rental players are completely off the table at this point. If you're not making the playoffs, you don't want rental players. So hockey deals, we have the ability to make hockey deals because we've got the depth of guys like Samberg, Chisholm, Hanola. We can make deals on the back end of the defense. The 5 defensemen that we have, Demelo, Dillon, Schmidt, Pionk, and yes, Josh Morrissey can all be available in a trade and should be available in a trade. Up front, the only guys on this team that are untouchable, we'll get it out of the way, in my opinion, are Pierre-Luc Dubois and Connor Hellebuyck. You do not trade either of those guys. Franchise goalies do not grow on trees. Carey Price had a bad year one year, makes Stanley Cup final the next year. This is the way goalies go, okay? It's a down year, big deal. You do not let go of Hellebuyck. Dubois is that shiny new toy. You can't let go of a two-way center like Dubois. That's the identity you need on this team. Now, you'll notice I didn't say Kyle Connor. Kyle Connor is as close to untouchable as you can get, but the caveat is he's a winger. I know he scores a ton of goals, but there's a lot of times that Connor doesn't engage in good back checks or good defensive zone positions. So yes, he scores a lot, but he may be part of this problem as well too. He may not. Would I go actively shopping Connor? No. Would I entertain phone calls on him in pieces for deals? You're damn right I would. I would literally trade anybody but those two guys at this point in a hockey deal if I'm getting new players to come back. And if you don't want to believe me on Connor, take a look at this back check. He's at the top of your screen here. As they go ahead and enter the zone and I got to stop it here. Look at this. This is a 4-on-3 and we've backed up and given up 4 feet of gap right now, and we're 10 feet into the zone when we outnumber Vancouver. That's not the way to go. Brock Besser is going to open it up to an unbelievably open JT Miller there. And look, Mr. Kyle Connor, glide some more, my friend. Glide some more. This is what I'm talking about. Elite offensive players of the Winnipeg Jets gliding on the way back, not dedicating themselves to playing defense the right way. Who's back there? Pierre-Luc Dubois is back there. That's the guy who's leading the charge with two-way hockey. So as talented as Connor is, and he is damn talented, he is this close to untouchable, but he is not untouchable in this list. Okay, so what does a hockey trade look like? That looks like a player with term for a player with term. We have 2 players right now in Copp and Stastny who have no term left after this year. And because of the position the Jets have put themselves in, both those guys, in my opinion, as much as I love Andrew Copp, I was a huge fan of him the minute he was drafted. These are 2 guys that need to be dealt before the deadline for anything you can get back at this point. There's no point in trying to re-sign Copp because he's going to be looking for a 5x5. And frankly, the team just isn't good enough whether Copp is here or not. So you got to start making deals for different pieces that have different attitudes on the ice. You got to mix it up. So Copp, Stastny got to go. Stastny's an attractive piece for teams because at the end of the day, Paul Stastny only has a $3.5 million cap hit. A lot more teams can take that under the salary cap, put him on the third line for a veteran presence for a Stanley Cup run. Andrew Copp is the kind of guy that you could look to a team like, say, the Boston Bruins. I know I've mentioned them a lot on this channel, but the Bruins love making deals. And there's a guy called Jake Debrusk, who is a former first-round draft pick, who was drafted in the same year as Kyle Connor. He's not as good as Kyle Connor, but this is a guy that maybe Boston would be willing to part with. He said he wants out of Boston. Boston's going to make it happen, I believe. It hasn't worked. They could go ahead and bring in Copp, do a little bit of magic to get under the cap there, but I'm sure they'd figure it out. Copp would be a perfect fit in Boston. Debrusk would get a chance to resurge here in Winnipeg. And hey, if he doesn't work out, not a big deal. You could go ahead and get a first-round pick for Andrew Copp, likely a low first-round pick because you're going to be trading with a contender. So you're going to get a bottom 10 first-round pick for Copp, which is a dart, or you can go ahead and have a proven asset in Debrusk that maybe can end up shining a little bit. So either way, it's a low-risk deal to make, but you got to get something back for Copp. Okay, on to the big deals now. The guys that we can look to move. Schiefele's on the board. Ehlers is on the board. Wheeler is on the board. But you got to remember, guys, everyone would want to trade a guy like Schmidt, Wheeler, guys who are just at or over 30 years old, very expensive contracts, and get the world for them. That's not how it works. When you trade guys like Mark Schiefele, who's 27, 28, Nick Ehlers, who's about 25 years old, Josh Morrissey, who's 25, 26 years old, these are young in their prime guys that if you go ahead and you deal them, you're going to get a massive return and good players back. And let's talk about the core. You got to trade your heart here at this point, okay? Wheeler, Schiefele, and Morrissey. Those are your three captains. That's who's been identified as the heart of the team. Like I said, it's Hellebuck and Dubois for me. You got to trade one or two of those heart guys at this point. Look, the Bruins traded Joe Thornton, worked out amazing for them, ended up getting a Stanley Cup. They had no fear to trade Sagan. They had no fear to trade Phil Kessel. You trade who you need to trade to make your team better. Today, that's what the attitude the Jets need to have instead of this small town crap where we're just lucky to have a team and be poor little Winnipeg. We're not. We're playing with the big boys. We're in the NHL. We've got some moves that we can make here. So I do think you got to get Wheeler out of there. It's just, he's not going to get a massive return. Schiefele is going to get you a huge return, and Morrissey will get you a huge return too. Let's take a look at some of those returns. Go ahead and look at Montreal. You want to look at a guy or a team that's looking to rebuild. What are they asking for a guy like Brenden Gallagher? Look, I know he's polarizing. A lot of guys don't like the way he plays hockey, but he is a locker room team first guy, and people have said it. They love playing with Brenden Gallagher. He's a heart and soul guy of the Canadiens. He's only 1 year removed from a Stanley Cup final with the Canadiens. He's absolutely a top six winger, and he's got term, and he's not super duper expensive. This is a character guy that can turn around your locker room. This is a guy that you want to bring in. Yes, he's like Brad Marchand. Yes, he's like the old Corey Perry. Little bit chirpy, bit of an agitator, but teams love having guys like that on their team. Locker rooms love it. He's not a locker room cancer. He's just a pest on the ice, and you want to have a couple of those guys. So I'd be very interested to see what the price is on a guy like Gallagher from Montreal. Now, let's go back to Winnipeg Jets 1.0, the Arizona Coyotes. They got two pieces I'd be heavily interested in looking at. The Jakob Chychurn sweepstakes are heating up, and the big boys all want him, but Winnipeg's got a few attractive pieces for it. What makes Jakob Chychurn attractive in Winnipeg is that he's a true number one top 20 defenseman in the NHL with potential to be a top 10 guy. He's young, he's 23, he's 24, he's played in the NHL since he was 18, same draft year as Logan Stanley. He's got a massive pedigree. And when I think of Jomo and Neil Pionk, these aren't true number one defensemen. They are top pairing defensemen. Yes, they're in the top 60 of the NHL, but they are not true 35-minute workhorse players. Actually, if I had Morrissey and Pionk on my team, I'd be thrilled if they were on my second pairing. Okay, Neil Pionk is there, but let's be honest, second best defenseman the Jets got. I would be thrilled to have these guys in my 3-4 lineup, maybe as my second defenseman on the top pairing, but I don't want them to be my number one carry the team guy. Chychurn, on the other hand, would want him all day to carry a team, could totally turn a locker room around. So what kind of deal could you put together for Jakob Chychurn? How about Josh Morrissey and Ville Heinola? There's a lot of people who have said, hey, Anton Lundell's been offered by the Panthers. You're never going to beat that plus. Think about this for a minute. Defensemen don't grow on trees. You don't really want to trade young upstart defensemen like Jakob Chychurn, who are just horses and studs, for forwards. Really, you don't want to. Even centermen, it doesn't normally work out. You'd rather have the defenseman. At least I would. I remember that Seth Jones trade. Look, Jones was the better guy in that trade. Johansson is still hanging around in Nashville, but it's just not the same. You want that number one stud horse of a defenseman. So Chychurn is more valuable than not any, but most forwards that teams are going to offer him. Josh Morrissey is an NHL-ready defenseman who's still very, very young by NHL standards. He plugs into Arizona with tons of term left. Ville Heinola is a huge upstart prospect. Arizona would love that. He probably makes Arizona in the bottom six right now. So they're getting two NHL-ready defensemen. And maybe you have to add a prospect or a pick on top of that. But those two players by themselves, for me, if I'm Arizona, heavily attractive in that deal. I'd be looking at it. Chychurn's the number one guy I'd be targeting right now to turn this team around. From Arizona as well, Lawson Crouse, big two-way player. This is a character guy. You go to Arizona to die. You retire, you die in Arizona. If you're Canadian, you buy some property, you have a good life. Not a problem. Same thing happens to hockey players. Same thing happened to Crouse. Crouse is a 16-year-old with Team Canada in the World Juniors. He's a big two-way player, and he's a guy that could definitely help Winnipeg now. I'd be calling to inquire on the price of Crouse. Now, how about the Vancouver Canucks? We just played them. They have two players there right now that I'd be heavily interested in, and Jim Rutherford will deal anybody. He has been known to make trades. He'll even trade his mother. Rutherford loves making deals. He made tons with Pittsburgh. He has said, Demko, Hughes, and Pettersson off the board. Everybody else is available, and there's a lot of damn good players in there, including Brock Besser, Bo Horvat, and JT Miller. Look, JT Miller's got a year left on his term. I don't love the idea of buying guys who are at their ceiling. This is the best year JT Miller's ever had. He's incredible this year, but I don't know if that success continues with Winnipeg. He's north of 30. It would be lovely if you could flip a guy like Wheeler for Miller straight up. Never going to happen. Miller's worth more than Wheeler. And Vancouver is in full rebuild mode right now as well. Rutherford's pretty impatient though, so he may take Wheeler plus a pick and a prospect or a couple other young guys for a guy like JT Miller right now. And yes, teams who are Stanley Cup contenders want a guy like JT Miller, but again, because he's got the year left of term, even though Winnipeg isn't likely to make the playoffs this year, this is a guy you can reset your locker room with next year and may be able to sign into the future. But the guy I'd really be targeting from Vancouver, this would be the golden goose, Bo Horvat. If Bo Horvat is available because he wasn't in that list, you go get Bo Horvat. He's young. He's a captain. He is a proven captain. Winnipeg right now, in my opinion, lacks proper leadership. Wheeler, Schiefele, and Morrissey, they aren't it. They're not. You need to flip one of those captains for another captain. You need a leadership injection into this team. Pierre-Luc Dubois, absolutely throw a letter on that guy's jersey once you clear one of these guys out. If you bring in Bo Horvat for, let's say, I'm going to go reaching into the cupboard for Mark Schiefele. Mark Schiefele is an offensive phenom. Love Schiefele, love his cap hit. But at this point, his two-way play just isn't there. Something's going on in Jets land. Is Bo Horvat and Mark Schiefele equal? No, Schiefele is worth more than Horvat because the offensive upside and the cheap deal. So maybe you get Horvat plus from Jim Rutherford. He would salivate at the opportunity to bring in a guy like Schiefele, and we would love to get a return like Bo Horvat. Dubois moves up to the first line. Horvat plugs in at the second line for Winnipeg. Now we're making some deals. And you'll notice I haven't addressed Nick Ehlers yet. Look, guys, I love Nick Ehlers just as much as anybody else. I wouldn't be looking to trade him right away. He's very close to Kyle Connor territory, in my opinion. But you know what? Anybody is movable. And as much as I like Nick Ehlers, I've said it a million times, they're just wingers. Wingers are usually replaceable. Even though there's elite players like Panarin, Kucherov, just absolutely dynamic wingers in the NHL, at the end of the day, you build your team down the middle with awesome centermen. You build your team with number one, number two defensemen and great goaltending. Goaltending is there, check. Dubois is there, check. We need a number one defenseman. Let's go get Chychurn or somebody like it, and let's go find ourselves some Bo Horvat or somebody of that nature. Let's flip the script, team. Hey, will it make us the playoffs this year? Probably not, but it gives us a really good place to rebuild and retool for next year because this team's cupboards are full. We have so much depth behind these guys, especially on the defensive side, that we can afford to flip a couple of these guys, but we need hockey players back, not draft picks, proven NHL guys to come back. Let's go see if Chevy can make us a hockey deal.